Hello, my creepy crew. Ms. Story Mystery here with another collection of mysteries and oddities. Today's true creepy tales include the horrifying experience of a couple on a camping trip, the sighting of a ghost dog, and the story of a shadowy spirit who tries to lure its victim to the basement. Sit back, relax, and enjoy episode 14 of Ms. Story Mysteries Tales of Mysteries and Oddities. Last December, I was rearranging furniture around the house, and as I drew the living room curtains, I distinctly felt something grab my fingers from behind the curtain. Felt like cold, hard fingers, almost childlike. I checked, expecting my cheeky younger sibling, but the place was absolutely empty. No explanation at all. Didn't think too much into it because I was crazy busy at the time. Looking back, it really freaks me out. Very recently, I was lured into my basement by a dark spirit. I have a friend who considers herself a medium. She will often call and tell me if she sees or hears anything strange somewhere, or if she communicates with a deceased person. I consider myself sensitive to the paranormal, but I am by no means a medium. One morning, she texted me about a spirit emergency, so I called her and asked what was up. Apparently, she had seen what she could only describe as a dark spirit in her apartment a few miles away, and felt this intense need to contact me about it. She told me it did not feel human, that there was something evil about it, and that we should both be careful. She was scared enough to consider staying with her awful parents for the night, so I could tell that she had been rattled. Sure, I said. I wasn't sure whether or not this was something that I was actually going to let bother me. I've had my own experiences with the paranormal, enough to make me weary of encounters more often than afraid. She was sincere, so I promised to be careful. A few nights later, I walked into my bathroom to grab something when I very clearly heard running water. More accurately, it sounded like water falling and slapping something solid. The sound was seemingly coming from the vent beside the toilet, so I figured a pipe must have somehow burst in the basement. It's a rather old house, and I know nothing about plumbing, so why not? I wasn't surprised. It bothered me more than it should, considering money is really tight at the moment, and I absolutely cannot afford any repairs. I calmly walked to the basement door and headed down the rickety old stairs, sighing. I had no clue what I was going to do. All I could think about were dollar signs. Just as I pass our furnace on my way to our laundry room, which is where most of the plumbing is, I saw what was very clearly a dark silhouette ducked behind the furnace. It didn't immediately bother me as, like I said, I've seen things before, and the basement was usually a hot spot of activity. Shadow figures are nothing new to me. In my head, I noted the size of the dark figure was larger than usual, and continued on my way. Oh well. The moment I stepped into the laundry room, my heart skipped a beat. There was no broken pipe. The basement was dead quiet. If there was any water running in the house, I would have very clearly heard it the moment I entered that room. Hell, I should have known the moment I passed the furnace, but the figure and my concern with the cost of potential repairs had me distracted. I realized immediately that there never was a broken pipe. Dread enveloped me. Something intelligent enough to know my biggest concern was living paycheck to paycheck had somehow fabricated something I could absolutely not ignore for the sole purpose of getting me down into my basement alone. Nobody in their right mind would ignore the sound of running water in their own home, let alone someone who could absolutely not afford for something to go wrong. I knew right away that I was dealing with something beyond the norm, and that if I lingered, I would regret it. It had manipulated me into the one room in my basement without any other exit, and if I did try to leave, I'd have to walk right past where it was hiding, or waiting. I wasn't sure. I had underestimated this thing I had seen. My instincts were screaming at me to run, but I knew from experience that I would be all right if I calmly and carefully retreated. Running sometimes feels like giving in to fear and letting them get to me, and I was not about to let that happen. I was scared but indignant. I haven't been in the basement since. It was the first time in a long time that something paranormal had frightened me, though the moment lasted only seconds between my realization and calmly getting myself out of the situation. I now consider it my creepiest, if not most disturbing encounter. I've had things chase me, jump out at me, whisper things, and even growl. They're scary for a second, but then you move on. I've never before had an entity manipulate me like that. It was so clever. I was lured down there. I don't think whatever it was had any human qualities to it, but I don't want to go as far as claiming it was demonic. I'm not sure what it was. It made me hear something that never existed. All I'm sure of is that there was some malicious intent to get me down into the basement with itself between me and the exit. It wanted me alone and afraid. Quite rude, if you ask me. I was shopping with my husband at Target when I hear a low, growly voice say my name. I turned, expecting to see someone I knew trying to scare me. No one was there, and my husband heard it too. I love horror and spooky stuff, but if I think about this in bed at night, it still makes my blood run cold. I can't explain how terrifying it was. When I was a young teenager, we lived along the approach to a major airport, about 12 miles out. Planes were still a few thousand feet up, but you could make out which airlines by tailpaint design. I was in our backyard when I heard a plane overhead, but it did not sound right. I looked up and was shocked to see flames coming off of a large airliner, streaming back along the sides of the fuselage. The plane dipped its right wing a little, which was not a normal alignment along that flight path, and angled further west and dropped altitude faster than normal. I watched it for about 30 seconds until it disappeared over the western hills, followed a few moments later by a distant, muffled whoosh, and the western sky brightening for a moment. I ran inside the house and alerted my mom that I had seen a passenger plane crash. She was so concerned she called the airport, but they assured her that everything was normal. Later that day, my parents and I watched the evening news for any info on this, but nothing. I remember most everything about that event as clear as day, and the sound of the plane most of all. And yet, there was no plane crash. I'm still not sure what I witnessed, but it always made me a little leery of flying. I was camping by a lake with my boyfriend. I woke up in the tent in the middle of the night and heard footsteps and heavy breathing around my tent. So I woke up my boyfriend and he went outside to check it out. As soon as he went out, all the noises stopped. He said he saw nothing and came back in, but as soon as he laid down, it started up again. It was terrifying. We never figured it out. There were no trees. It was all sand and dirt for miles in a canyon. Nothing for anyone to hide behind. And it sounded as if it was right outside. Super scary. I won't camp there anymore. I've had my fair share of spiritual experiences and strange dreams, but there's one moment that was starkly lucid and undeniably paranormal. One night, my husband and I were traveling and passing through the city I grew up in. We needed a place to stay, so my aunt let us crash at her place. Being the warm and generous woman that she is, she insisted that we take her master bedroom. So we arrive and get settled in, unpack, all that stuff. I'm usually the last one to get into bed, so I'm the one that shuts off the lights. Now, keep in mind that neither of us has been drinking. We're not especially drained, perhaps somewhat tired, but not abnormally so. I flip the lights off, and the bedroom becomes pitch black. I can't see my own hand in front of my face. I need to feel my way into bed. As I'm getting under the covers, I see something. In the middle of the room, stark against the darkness, is a large dog. It is glowing whitish green, not unlike a glow-in-the-dark tennis ball. Seriously, it's just standing there, about the size and shape of an adult Labrador. I reach over, tap my husband, and say, "Babe, do you see that?" I'm thinking it's a trick of my mind right now, but he sits up and goes, "Is that a dog?" So I stand back up, feel my way to the light, turn it on. The dog is gone. The room is empty. Our two golden retrievers are asleep in bed already on the opposite side of the room. I look around for mirrors, electronics that cast a light, maybe a smoke detector. Nothing. Nothing to explain the full apparition of a dog in my aunt's beautiful bedroom. I always thought that a ghost encounter was supposed to come with strong emotions, fear or dread, warmth or joy, but it all felt very matter of fact, just, oh, there it is. All I can say is that my aunt did have a Labrador, and it passed away in this house. I don't know if it was a ghost, an echo in time, a dimensional hiccup, or what, but my husband saw it too. I've always had trouble sleeping, or I would wake up at night to a pitch black room. In one of the foster homes I lived in, I would wake up. I had to share a room with another girl in the middle of the night, and there would always be a shadow of a short man crouching against my roommate's dresser, just staring at her sleeping. I looked with flashlights. I checked to see if there was something there that would make the shadow, which makes no sense because the room was pitch black and had no light. This happened every night for like a month. I also saw eyes in the closet, but that is a story for another time. Years ago, I fell asleep on my mother's living room sofa. She was already in bed, but my brother was out somewhere. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to see someone standing over me and covering me with a blanket. It looked like a man wearing a bandana. I assumed it was my brother, but thought it was strange for him to be wearing that. The next morning, I asked him about it, and he said he didn't even come into the living room when he came home, and it wasn't him who covered me up. My mother also denied doing it, and no one else was in the house that night. I didn't really find it creepy until a while later, when one of my aunts stayed at my mom's house and reported the exact same thing happened to her. Apparently, there was a ghost in that house that wanted to make sure people were tucked in when they fell asleep on the sofa. Could be worse. It was second year at university, and I was living in this creepy-ass townhouse. It overlooked a giant ravine filled with trees. Had a very unsettling feeling when you looked out our huge living room windows. Also, our living room was on the second floor, and our basement had a walkout to said ravine. So while living at this place, I experienced lots of weird shit. but this one rises well above the rest. So, one night, I was watching television in our living room. The TV was set up so that it was in front of the living room windows. Keep in mind, we didn't have any window curtains because we were broke-ass poor students. So, the whole time you had this eerie ravine in the background at all times. I was cooking pasta, and it fogged up our windows completely. As I'm coming back from the kitchen, I sit down and continue watching television. Halfway through my pasta, my eyes look at the windows since something caught my eye. I literally drop my fork and my mouth is gaping wide open. There is a fresh handprint that has been streaked across the window from inside of the house with moisture dripping down. I walk closer since I'm skeptical and my fears are realized. Someone or something just put its hand across the window. At the moment, a sheer feeling of terror was all around me. Nope. I ran out of there in my shorts and t-shirt in the freezing cold to my friend's house. I was sleeping peacefully one night when I awakened to my husband in the room. He's randomly wearing a red hat and just standing close to the door. I lift my head and say, "What are you doing?" Then fall back asleep because I was so tired. He never answered me. I kind of awaken slightly again a minute or two later and he isn't there anymore. So now I'm struggling with just going back to sleep or getting up because I'm curious to know if he needed to ask me something. So a couple minutes later I muster the energy to get up. I find him in the garage and ask him why he was staring at me in my sleep. He has no idea what I'm talking about. I tell him about the hat, but he doesn't own one. He also says he's been in the garage for hours. I was completely creeped out and have no idea how I managed back to my room that night. In the morning, I realized that I was probably sleeping and just imagined the whole thing. But a small part of me still fears the man in the red hat. My favorite city to visit is Savannah, Georgia. So after I graduated college, my parents took me there for a long weekend to celebrate. My mother loves to watch those ghost hunter shows, and with Savannah being one of the most haunted cities, she was super excited. We stayed at the Marshall House, which is one of the oldest hotels in the city. It also happened to be a yellow fever hospital at one point in its long history. We ended up getting a suite with a bedroom separated via French doors to a living room with a fireplace and a pull-out couch where I slept. Night 1, I'm getting my bed ready, and Mother Dearest comes in and puts one of those flashlights that you see the ghost hunt people using all the time because it's very easy to turn on and off on the mantle of the fireplace facing me. I said, "Oh, hell no." She thought it was the funniest thing. Fast forward to morning, and no flashlight, thank the Lord. But apparently, Dad got up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and when he walked out of the bathroom, he had to close the boudoir door so he could make his way back to bed. He laid down, thought about it, then it dawned on him he wouldn't have been able to get to the bathroom if the door to the boudoir was open to begin with. Mother was so excited that we could actually be in a haunted room. Our last full day there, we had breakfast delivered to the room so we could eat on the balcony on the rocking chairs. I had finished my food, so I came back inside, sat on the couch, and started reading either brochures or a magazine or something. The ceilings were high, and there was a ceiling fan with 3 lights on it. But since we got there, only one of the bulbs worked, so we just supplemented with the table lamps. No big. I hadn't turned on the lamp yet when Dad walked inside. He told me to turn the lamp so I can see better, and as I started reaching for the lamp, both of the other light bulbs in the ceiling fan turned on. At this point, Mother is pissed because nothing has happened to her yet, and the flashlight has yet to turn on, so she's talking to whatever it is in the room trying to provoke it. Probably could have done without that. We go to bed that night. The damn flashlight is still on the mantel. My parents shut the French doors. I put the flashlight in my purse because I was over it. Fell asleep, but woke up at some point in the night to what sounded like someone getting up from the chair in the room. Damn it. So, the way the room was set up, the pull-out couch was on the same wall as the door that opened up to the hallway. The fireplace was to my left, and the chair was near the lower left corner of the bed. Then I hear what sounds like heavy boots slowly walk from the chair, around my bed, towards the door. Then I hear a clink on the side table in between the bed and the door. I was not about to open my eyes and see some Civil War soldier standing next to my bed, so my eyes were glued shut, and I just remember thinking that if anything touches me, I'm out. What was probably 2 seconds but felt like 2 minutes passed before I heard the boots walk down the hallway away from our door. At this point, my heart is beating out of its chest, and all I could think was if that damn flashlight is on in my purse, so help me God. Waited a few minutes before I got enough courage to unfurl from the blankets, eyes closed still, and reach for the lamp. When I did open my eyes, nothing, and nothing on the side table. Didn't sleep the rest of the night. And my mother was pissed that nothing happened to her on this trip. Last night I woke up in the middle of the night and was having trouble falling asleep. When I finally started to fall asleep, lying on my back, I felt like a hand was pulling the covers down from my chin. I have a 4-year-old daughter who likes to sneak into our room, and I've gotten pretty good at sensing her standing next to the bed in the dark with my eyes closed. I opened my eyes. Nobody there. I figured I imagined it. Over the next half hour, I swore I felt those covers pulled down at least 4 to 5 times, and jerked myself awake to find the covers down a few inches from my chin each time, but nobody there. Finally, I had to get up and walk to the bathroom, get some essential oils or something, because there was no way I could sleep after that. This old woman hiker in her 70s somehow saw us in reverse order through a wormhole or something. The first time we saw her, she said, "Oh, well, hello again." I just passed it off as her being old, slightly senile. Then, 30 minutes later, we saw her again, and this time she just said hi as she passed us. I'm not even sure how she got there. She was going in the opposite direction of us on the trail both times. A few months back, I was working with a dementia patient who told me frequently they would burn my house down once they die and haunt me from the grave. Thinking nothing of it, the day before this person passed away, I went home after a long day. Summertime. My electric wall heater in my bedroom was turned on to the max. See, you had to physically turn the heat on and press the button to make the heat go to max about 20 times. My curtains that hung from the window above the electric heater were not hemmed at the time and were falling straight into the top of the heater. Next day I go to work and find out that my patient passed away right after my shift the previous day. I came home a second day to find my electric heater again turned on, but in my bathroom. Hanging above the heater is a towel rack with one of my towel corners just grazing the heater. I smudged my house and myself that night. Thankfully, the trying to burn my house down stopped after that. One night, my fiancé and I were sitting on the couch hanging out. I think we were both on our phones and distracted. All of a sudden, the light in the dining room turned off. and we both snapped our head to look at it. In that moment of looking at the light, I felt his hand just touch my face and sort of press hard. It was kind of like a push. Without looking back, I sort of swatted and told him to stop, but I never made contact with his arm or hand. I turned around, and he was clear on the other side of the couch. This all happened so quickly that he wouldn't have had time to get back to the other side. This happened to me last week. Usually, my husband leaves for work before me, as he works first shift and I work second. So, this particular morning, after my husband left for work, our alarm went off again and woke me up. I hit the snooze button and closed my eyes to try to fall back asleep. In the quiet and stillness of the morning, I heard shuffling down the hallway outside our bedroom, like my husband had come back home and was walking down our hallway with his socks on. I heard the sound stop outside our bedroom door. I thought maybe he forgot something. I opened my eyes and saw a gray blur at the foot of my bed, but thought it was due to my dry contact lens since I slept with them in. I blinked a few times to see if the gray blur would go away, but eventually just gave up, and I turned my attention to our bedroom door, waiting for him to walk in. I waited, but there was just silence. At this point, I was a little creeped out. Then, all of a sudden, right next to me, a male voice says, "Dad." Inside my head, I was like, is this really happening right now? I looked to my side and nothing. Then the voice says again, "My dad." Before he was able to finish what he was saying, I thought to myself, this is sleep paralysis, and I bet if I tried to get up, I wouldn't be able to. So I sat right up, but felt no resistance. Everything just stopped right then, and the whole house was quiet again. I called my husband at work and told him about it, creeped him out. Thinking about it now, I regret not letting him finish what he had to say. I used to have an old slider phone. One day I got a random call asking for some girl named Sarah. I told them that they had the wrong number, and they immediately hung up. For the next few months, I would get these calls asking for Sarah about once or twice a week, coming from different numbers and different sounding people. Sometimes these calls came at 3 in the morning. Well, one day I got a call, and like usual, I said I didn't know Sarah, and after they hung up, I went to my contacts and hit redial. After I did, the machine took over and said that number did not exist. I went back through my call history, trying to call some other people that had called me with the same result, a machine telling me the number did not exist. Every time I would get these calls, I would redial the number and still got the machine. I Googled the numbers, but all I learned is they were coming from North Dakota, Montana, basically everywhere in the Midwest, which isn't all that weird because I live there. I started wondering what was going on. So the next time I got a call asking for Sarah, I said, "Oh yeah, she's right here." And the other person on the other end said, "No, she isn't," and hung up. Then things started getting weird when I started getting calls from unknown numbers calling me. Whoever or whatever on the other end hanging up the second I said hello. The creepiest one I ever got was from a call where they didn't hang up after I said hello. I could hear someone was on the other end, just listening, but they didn't say anything. Just something really uneasy about it. Eventually, I switched phones and got a smartphone, and I immediately stopped getting calls. I haven't gotten a single random call in about 3 years now, despite the fact I still have my old number from the old phone. My mom and her sister had an imaginary friend whom they named Snookums. When they asked him his name, he said he didn't know. As time went on, Snookums continued to talk to them. and as they became teenagers, Snookums was still there. My mom had the impression that he wasn't a ghost, but was actually a little kid who was somehow stuck in a higher dimension. Snookums then disappeared for a long while, only to reappear after my mom had my brother and I. I have actually heard Snookums' voice, and he really did sound like a normal kid. He even made the wood decking of the house creak beneath his weight, even though you couldn't see him. He never slept, and he was terrified of being alone. However, he would inexplicably disappear for weeks at a time, yet would deny he ever went anywhere. He used circular logic constantly, and you could glean absolutely no information from him about anything. However, he did say that trees talked to him, so there you go. My story took place about 7 years ago, and I was by no means a child just imagining things. I gamed quite a bit in those days, so as soon as I finished my shift, 7 p.m., I went home and loaded up my tune to get some raiding done. About 7:30 p.m. at that point. It's summer, so it's still quite bright outside. While my game loaded, I popped out back for a quick dart. This is where things got weird. The backyard is pretty big. I don't remember exact dimensions or anything, but it was standard, I would imagine. There were 2 trees and a large bush in the yard. I was standing in the yard when motion in the overgrown grass caught my eye. This movement moved from a tree to the fence that borders the yard about 10-ish feet. I figured it was a squirrel or something as it moved semi-slowly. I like nature, so I watched it do its thing. Then, sort of suddenly, it bolted back to the tree, faster than I've seen a squirrel ever move. I'm intrigued at that point. I was curious as to what spooked it. I kept watching. About 7 feet to my right was this giant bush, and about 15 feet directly in front of me is the aforementioned tree. This motion in the grass then started to creep towards this bush. As the motion started to pass by me, smoke or steam started to form in it, over it. Within a moment, this steam smoke was pouring out of the motion in the grass. This smoke then formed a leg, that then formed a foot that took a step. As I moved my eyes back up the smoke, it formed a body and arms and, amazingly, a head. It's now standing in front of the bush, just to my right. A full-bodied figure. It was very clearly a young guy, maybe 17, 18 years old. He was wearing what looked like acid-wash jeans, a denim jacket with lumberjack shirt underneath. He had white Adidas and a bowl haircut, very 90s sort of look. At that point, my entire body lit up in goosebumps. I remember thinking even the tip of my nose had goosebumps and how weird that was. I said out loud, "Holy shit," and the kid snapped his head around to his right and looked at me with an expression of absolute surprise, as if I just appeared in front of him instead of the other way around. He wasn't wearing white clothes, he was in grayscale, but with the white cranked pretty high, if you get my meaning. His flesh was cloud white, but his clothes were in shades of gray. His eyes, however, were completely black. Half a second after I said shit, he completely dissipated, like steam. I've still got half a smoke at that point. I put it out and head back in. I turned my computer off and just take a seat in the couch, thinking what the F that could have been. Suddenly, I feel 2 distinct hands on my shoulders, as if someone were standing right behind me, which is impossible as the couch was against the wall. I yell, "Oh fuck, please just leave me alone," and then the hands were gone. Apart from occasional bangings in the upstairs, I never witnessed anything else in that house. Moved out about 3 months later. I was terrified but interested. Obviously, to me anyways, this was an option of some kind. I always just assumed when you die, that's it. Game over, man. Now, I'm not so sure. The house that I live in is a long way from any other house. It's about a half-mile to the nearest house through fairly thick woods, and there's a lake on one side of the house. There is a road that goes past my house and crosses the lake as a one-lane bridge. There was one night a few years ago in the summer where I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of someone playing piano very loudly from what sounded like on the bridge. I looked out the window and there was nothing, so I just relaxed and tried to fall asleep again. A few moments later, however, some loud, inhuman screaming came over the water. It was blood-chilling. It sounded similar to a fisher cat's scream, except it was significantly louder and more shrill. It went on for a few minutes and absolutely scared the crap out of me. I tried to look for something out the window, but never saw anything. When the screeching stopped, the piano continued to play for a while and eventually faded away. Needless to say, I did not fall back asleep the rest of the night. I was far too frightened. I tried to look in the woods around the lake for signs of anything at all the next day, but there was nothing. To this day, I have no idea what it was. When I was a kid, I went down to the kitchen in the middle of the night to fix a snack. When I came around the corner of the dining room, I saw what I can only explain as a giant owl sitting on the table. It had to be at least 5 feet high. I ran back to my room, locked the door, and have told myself it was a bad dream ever since. About 10 years ago, I would have been in my early 20s. Me and 2 of my friends decided one night to head down some train tracks and break into an old abandoned coal mine on the outskirts of town. My friend had been there a week before exploring with a buddy, and so we climbed through a hole in the fence they had cut. This place was pitch black, and I had no experience with mining yards, so I could only imagine what these giant looming towers and silos were all around us. I could just barely make out these darker patches that were giant doors and holes in the structures, and hear scuttling noises beyond. Those noises could easily be explained as pigeons or bats, so we were not too fazed. So we continued to our destination. We knew that our town was surrounded by old World War II forts and bunkers, and there was one on a hill in the middle of the mine yard. As we slowly crept towards our goal, I kept hearing a small tapping noise. Not too alarming, just a small tink, 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 coming from the dark behind us in the direction we had come. We make it to the base of the hill that holds the bunker and find some way to sneak around the only pole light in the yard and up the hill. The whole time we hear the soft tink, tink, tink behind us. Having made it up the hill and faced with the option to head into the bunker, we decide to pass. A little too creepy for us with no lights to find our way in or out. Instead, we decide to head around back, and this is where things get interesting. We find ourselves standing around a hole with a ladder leading down into a lower level of the bunker with that relentless tink, tink, tink coming from somewhere out in the shadows. Now, on 2 sides of us are the steep drop-off of the hill. On the other 2 sides are the walls of the bunker. We were boxed in on all sides, with only a small path leading out, and with the hole and ladder in the ground at our feet. So, we decide this is as good a place as any to light our joint, and so I break it out. With my back to the drop-off of the hill a few feet behind me, and the hole directly at my feet, I try. Well, I'm on top of a hill without much cover from the wind, and having a difficult time getting the joint lit, and I'm growing frustrated. Not to mention that tink, tink, tink is starting to get annoying. Up until this point, I assumed it was a metal sign hanging on the fence we climbed through, gently blowing in the wind, and so I ignored it. Frustrated with the joint and getting annoyed with the sound, I turned around and stared in its direction. I asked my friends what they thought it was and tried again to light the joint, but this time I was facing the noise and did not try to conceal the flame. As soon as the lighter flashed, the noise changed from a soft tink, tink, tink into a thunderous boom, boom, boom. Oh shit, security guards is the first thing that pops into my head. That booming noise is them running down metal stairs in one of these dark towers. They saw my face when the lighter's fire illuminated it, and now they're on their way. All three of us crouch halfway between flight and fight, unsure if we should run, hide, or do nothing. We decide to wait. It's too dark for them to find us easily, and they're so loud that we'll hear them the minute they get close. Boom, boom, boom. The noise just won't stop, and I swear it's getting louder. How long are these stairs, I think? This is weird. And I swear I hear movement in the grass and the darkness at the bottom of the hill. We all agreed it was probably just the wind in the grass, but decided it was time to sneak our way back out of this place. Slowly crouching through the dark, we move through the mining yard towards the exit when we run into a problem. Whatever is making that noise is in between us and the exit. We squat down in the middle of an open gravel road to try to figure out our next move. Safe in the thought it was just too dark for anybody to see us sitting there in the dirt. But just to be sure, we picked a spot that placed a large chain-link fence between us and that god-awful boom, boom, boom of the charging security guards. Now at this point, I decided to upgrade the guards to cops in my mind and was becoming a bit antsy, but we decided to wait them out. I guess at this point we all realized that none of this is making any sense and those guards or cops should have reached the bottom of those stairs by now. That's when things got weirder. With the boom, boom, boom in front of us, and nothing to do but wait if we want to use our only known exit, we start to hear something else. In the dark, all around us, but somewhere close and on the same gravel we were crouching on, things start to move. There was a thud noise, and then a slow scraping noise as something was dragged across the gravel. Then again from somewhere else, quiet but very close. These noises were all around us. Thuds, and then a slow dragging across gravel. But we could not really pinpoint in what direction they were coming from. At this point, I go from rational adult to scared kid, and I think of all the people who died at this mine, or what could be living in those tunnels. In my mind, the noise went from guards or police, shot past ghosts, and now is smack dab in the middle of Goblin and Giant Rat Town. Of course, we have to get the hell out of there, and decide that climbing the fence behind the mine, running into the woods, and making our way to the highway is our only option. And so we pick our butts up out of the dirt and sneak as fast as we can the hell out of there. We're making it. The noises are behind us and not getting any closer, and we find rows and rows of empty coal train cars. Perfect. We can walk freely between them with no chance of being spotted from a distance. With the end of the mine yard close by, and with the protection of the train cars, we relax a bit and talk in less hushed whispers. I guess that was a mistake. A few seconds after entering the rows of train cars, the first car explodes in noise. Boom! Whatever was making that booming noise was right behind us, only feet away. I have never in my life, nor will I ever, I'm sure, move so swiftly again. The hundreds of feet between me and the fence to the outside world flew by, and I still do not understand how I got over the 10-foot fence so easily. I just remember leaping off it into the dark. We make it to the road and head back to town. The road bends around the mind, and we can still hear that relentless boom, boom, boom of something smashing that train. My friends get too uncomfortable talking about it and seem happy to forget anything weird ever happened. But my curiosity drives me nuts, and I've gone back a few times over the years. Nothing out of the ordinary happened, and the last time I went by myself, everything was torn down and taken away. My 4-year-old nephew was in my room playing when I heard him start screaming and crying, the likes of which I've never heard from him before. I run and ask him what's going on. He points at my bed and says, "I don't like the girl in your room." So of course I say, "What little girl?" He starts pointing at the closet, saying, "In there, she is right there." He is looking at me with the most desperate, scared eyes. I grab his hand and start walking to the closet to show him nothing is there. He collapsed and refused to go an inch closer. I just grabbed him and we go into the living room to watch Finding Nemo. When I was 19, I was walking home from the library and a cop pulled up to the curb asking to see my ID. I wasn't sure what was going on, but I showed it to him. After a moment of verifying that I was who my ID claimed I was, he apologized and handed me a printout of a missing teen, a couple of years younger than me. She could have been my identical twin. I told him that I didn't blame him for thinking I was her. I don't remember her name, I was too shaken up by the picture, but I still wonder what she's doing and if she's okay. It was nearly 20 years ago. I was maybe 7 or 8. My bedroom was at the end of a hall, probably more doors than walls, and my bedroom door makes a corner with the bathroom door. On a late-night bathroom trip, of course it's dark, I see a box on the floor in the corner and hear breathing. I lean in closer to the box, and the breathing gets louder. Never breaking eye contact with the box, I turn on a light. The sound stops, and the corner is empty. Mom is an early sleeper. Brother is a heavy sleeper, and Dad was at work till 5 a.m. It's been 20 years, and I still think about that breathing box. There was an abandoned house across the street. No utilities, no decks to get to the entry doors. It gave a bad energy. Every so often, the porch light would come on. Me and my boyfriend bought a sewing machine from Goodwill. Shortly after using it, strange things started to happen. The first was the oven door. It was cracked open one morning. Not fully open, not fully closed, just slightly cracked open. It was a position I found very difficult to put the oven door into, even when trying. I figured it must have been my boyfriend. There was no other explanation. It couldn't have possibly done it on its own. I decided to just close it and forget about it. A few weeks passed. I hadn't mentioned this to my boyfriend. I got home from work and he asked me, "Did you leave the oven door open this morning?" Now I am freaking out a little because first off, no, I didn't leave it open, and second off, I hadn't told my boyfriend about what happened. Well, not much else happened for a little while. Things were fairly well back to normal. Me and my boyfriend loved watching Ghost Hunters. Ironic, I know. And we were watching an episode one night in the bedroom. The door was closed, the lights were off, perfect atmosphere for it. Anyway, we heard a loud, deep boom sound. We lived in a 3-story apartment, so we figured the neighbors upstairs dropped something heavy. The noise was so loud and forceful that the bedroom door shook. The episode finished, and I went to leave the room. Well, turns out the pantry door was wide open. This is a door we keep closed because it blocks access to the bedroom. You would have a lot of trouble getting past that door and enter the bedroom if it was open. So, what seems to have happened is the door flew open and slammed against the wall behind it so hard that it shook the bedroom door. Luckily, the wall behind the door is more narrow than the door itself, so the door handle didn't hit the drywall. As hard as that sound was, the handle probably would have gone clear through the drywall. That was the most major activity for a while. About a year later, we were in a new apartment. We had suspected our ghost was tied to the sewing machine, and not the first apartment, because things started happening right after getting it. That seemed to be confirmed with little bumps and noises we would hear at night every now and then. Nothing too major happened in this apartment, though. Now we get to the more recent activity. This started about 3 months ago. It started when my boyfriend decided to use the machine. Normally I'm the one that uses it. Anyway, a few nights later, I started seeing weird things. I saw doors move on their own from positions they've never moved from in the past. I've seen hallway lights turn themselves on when my boyfriend swears he didn't do it. It got more interesting a month or so after that, around April. We started hearing noises in the kitchen while we were both in bed. It sounded like pots and pans moving around every now and then. We mostly just ignored this. One night around this time, we heard a very loud bang while we were in bed again. This one we had to check out. It couldn't just be the pots and pans settling. We checked the kitchen, but there was nothing out of place. We looked around for a while before finally entering the bathroom next to the master bedroom. In there, I found the body wash was tipped over and caught between the wall and a horizontal bar used to hold onto while showering, I guess. I thought it was weird that it fell over, but I figured that the water must have created some sort of air pocket underneath it when we set it down and it just slid off. This sort of thing had never happened before, but I guess there's a first time for everything. Well, the next night it happened again. The bang happened, only louder this time. I went to check it out, and sure enough, the body wash had moved, only this time it fell to the bottom of the tub floor. Now I'm starting to get a little bit worried. I set it back up there, and during the same night, it fell off again. This happened at least 1 or 2 more times before it stopped. Always when we were in bed. The last time it happened, I said out loud, "Stop dropping the body wash, we're trying to sleep." It hasn't happened since. This is actually the last time anything has happened. I don't know whatever happened to our little ghost, but as far as I can tell, it's gone now. I never really felt threatened by it. Freaked out occasionally from the noises and stuff, but I never thought it meant any harm. Well, my friends, that is all for episode 14 of Miss Story Mysteries, Creepy Tales of Mysteries and Oddities. I hope you enjoyed these true spooky stories. If you did, please like and subscribe, and consider sharing my videos and channel with a friend, as this will help me out tremendously as I am working on growing my channel. And if you have a true story that you would like to share, please email me at itsmisstorymystery@gmail.com. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay spooky.